killed me. Yep, that was the goal. But maybe I'm still alive. What? No. Oh no! I died. Whew. Time to take on a new foe. And I'm back. What? Stop it! I'm dead. For good. Good. Or maybe I'm not. We'll see. I'm in a different location because our sump pumps failed, our basement flooded, and my office is in our basement, so I'm not gonna be able to film in front of my bookshelves until we get all that sorted. So my filming location is gonna be pretty inconsistent for a little bit here. Sorry. But I am officially caught up with One Piece. I have read up to current chapter at the time that I'm filming this, and it feels weird. It feels cool. I feel like I've officially joined the crew now that I know as much as you guys know, actually significantly less because you've read this series a lot and I have read it once. But it feels satisfying and exciting, but also really, really sad because I have been loving reading this series this way, and I'm happy to be able to be discussing the series more by only covering a few chapters at a time, but I'm unhappy to not be able to read it every single day. I'm gonna start a reread. Not that I'm gonna document on my channel, I'll do it for me, but also I need my fix. Anyway, I'm gonna be talking about chapters 1026 through 1040. By the time this video goes live, we'll be, it doesn't matter. We start off with Momo biting Kaido. And so here's the thing. I know that Momo has to fight Kaido. In a way. I know that with all the parallels and all the ways in which these two and their conflict has been built up, we have to have some sort of facing off between the two. I don't expect a physical confrontation between the two because frankly, Momo can't hold his own unless it's just gonna be like a, no, there's no reason it should work for Momo to physically fight Kaido. I expect it to be an emotional confrontation, a battle of the wills, some sort of way around. It'll still be Kaido versus Momo, but it's not gonna be like who fights harder. Kaido fights harder. Momo's 8. I mean, he's not anymore. Oda, we need to talk about that. But anyway, I super didn't expect Momo to have this moment, which I'm thrilled by because while yes, it was a bit of a cheap shot, I love the way it was done because Momo, who is terrified, I love that even though now he's an adult, he's still a child and he's still afraid and he's still the exact same Momo. Nothing has changed except for his outward appearance. And so he's now standing in front of the Emperor of the Sea, the man who killed his father, the man who has threatened him and held him above a building and gaslit him for, you know, I don't know, a few months. I have no idea how much in-world time has passed. But this man, this 8-year-old is deservedly afraid of, but him remembering everything that Kaido has done to him and then despite his fear chomping down on him was surprisingly satisfying, and I completely didn't expect even a mild physical confrontation between the two, so I loved this. I also loved when Luffy hypes him up afterward and says, "That's an Emperor of the Sea you just took a bite out of. Is there a single thing left in the world for you to be scared of?" I love Luffy being Momo's hype man. Their relationship dynamic has been so interesting to me because while there are elements of Luffy that I'm still seeing this from a child's eyes and just being like, "Momo, you're big. Just do the thing. You're an adult now." And it's like, no, Luffy, he's not though. He's not though. Give him a break. And sometimes Luffy's really, really hard on him. But he also, I think Luffy just sees the potential in Momo and knows how far he can go and knows what he needs to do in order to conquer this battle. And him not only challenging Momo and standing toe-to-toe with him and saying, grow up and do it, which is super unfair to ask of him, but at the same time, it's what's needed. And then also looking at him and saying, what else do you have to be afraid of after this accomplishment? And I just love the dynamic between these two. I love Luffy being this sort of unexpected mentor to this kid. And then Luffy split the sky. He had a Yonko moment. He had an Emperor of the Sea moment. He split the sky. And there's more to it than just this because it's Oda. Because, okay, so it's a really big deal in and of itself that Luffy had his split the sky moment. I think every Emperor of the Sea has had one so far, except maybe Blackbeard. I'm not positive on him. But it's a big moment. It's huge. Luffy is now, he's now done what the greatest members of the series have done. But on top of that, it's not just Luffy had a big moment, big cool fight. It's never that simple. Also, on top of that, the Minks lost their Sulong form and they were gonna lose this fight against Jack and the frickin' tongue guy. But because Luffy split the sky, the clouds opened and they were able to defeat these two massive opponents. The Sulongs were able to finish their opponents because of the sky split moment. And I'm just so happy that Oda doesn't ever just let a moment be a moment. It always has to draw, either it's an emotional parallel to something else or it's a physical, this affects that, and this is, and it's all connected, and it makes it so much bigger, always. I really, really love the cloud magic that we're doing here with Momo. We have the clouds that are suspending the island, and Momo has to figure out how to make more clouds, bigger, stronger, bigger clouds, to be able to solve this whole, we're all gonna explode problem. So we're all gonna be dropped, and then also there's the explode thing that's recently been added. He had to figure it out, and I really like that it was like, dragons don't fly, they grab clouds, and him figuring out how to do that. But what I liked even more than that, what I love the most about what's happening with both Momo and Yamato right now is the roles that they're playing. Again, I never expected Momo to have a physical confrontation with Kaido. I expected the way that he faces off against Kaido, the way he does whatever he's going to do in order to take part in taking Kaido down, that it would have to be something else, not who can punch harder. And I love that both Momo and Yamato are having to be background characters. There's this line that said, where Yamato said, "We can't interrupt Luffy because he's the only one that can end Kaido, and Momo is the only one that can protect everyone else. We have to get through this danger without anyone else finding out." I really love this because it reminds me of Odin, how he would dance. He gave up his good standing with his people. He gave up his honor. He gave up this position, this image that he had built up about himself in order to dance like a fool, so that he could protect his people behind the scenes in a way that they didn't see. He was saving them and protecting them in a way that they didn't even realize. And I really love that the two people that are supposed to be the embodiment of Odin, the two people that are trying so hard to live up to his image, that are trying so hard to honor what he's done, these two people are having to not be the ones to throw the biggest punches, but to be the ones that are behind the scenes without anyone knowing, protecting their people. And I really think that that's the sign of a true shogun, the sign of someone like Odin, who never actually got to hold the mantle of a shogun. But shogun, am I saying that right? He truly was their shogun. He was the one that protected them and that always had their best interest at heart and that did everything in his power to keep them safe, even though they never knew it. And then you have the two people that are trying to live up to his name, that are trying to honor his memory, that are trying to embody who he was. And these two people are having to play roles that are behind the scenes that no one will see, probably. Maybe they'll notice it eventually, just like they did with Odin. But in the moment, this is a rewardless sacrifice that they're making. Momo with the clouds and trying to prevent the island from falling, and Yamato with the demon thing that I haven't even brought up yet, the fire demon thing, and the bombs. They're both having to do these behind the scenes acts to protect the people, just like Odin had to do. And I just really, really love that these two characters that cannot physically face off against Kaido, they say, don't interrupt Luffy. This is his role. Our role is to protect them without them seeing it. And that was the role that Oden took on for years. And I just think that that's a really satisfying place for Oda to have put them. Oh yeah, Rob Lucci is a member of CP0, so that's huge. Actually, no, not only that, CP0 has become such a big threat in how they're hunting down Robin. And even if we win the day and we take down Kaido and everything's great, we still have the world government and one of the highest levels of the world government on our tail trying to kidnap Robin. And I'm out of order now, but CP0 is doing this. The 5 elders are also bringing up Robin. Kaido and Big Mom also want to capture Robin so that they can get to the One Piece. Everybody has kind of, it seems like at the same time, realized Robin's a really important character in this story, and we should maybe start paying attention to her. And of course, this is at the same time that we're getting her demon form, and it's just like so many things with Robin. Robin is really coming into the main focus for so many people, and the fact that so many people are after her as well also shows that at the end of this fight, assuming we win the fight, at the end of this fight, it's not like, woohoo, party, you know, like it's not like your standard, our bounties went up, let's have some drinks and dance and have a good time. It's like, no, actually, we've got a lot to do at the end of this. Not only do we need to immediately start moving so that CP0, the elders, well, if assuming we take down Kaido, they're out of the picture. But you know, there are people on our tail for us, but then also we have a lot of information to distribute with the poneglyphs and with everything that Yamato and Momo know, and there's a lot that we have to do after we punch Kaido hard enough, after we take Kaido down. Oh, I also, as I was talking about Yamato, I kind of summarized Yamato and Momo's plight very quickly, but I would like to mention that Yamato's, I don't really know the terms for any of this stuff, but Yamato in full dog form, adorable. Oh, right. Okay, sure. Let's talk about more dinosaur anatomy, because Queen is a brilliant character. He's evil, he's ruthless, he either is making me laugh and dance, or I hate him and I want someone to take him down. But sometimes he turns into a dinosaur that can detach itself, cobra itself around someone, and then also shoot at itself and blow itself up. Honestly, the way Oda has decided to roll with dinosaurs in this is so unpredictable and hilarious. It is full speed nonsense, and I'm so happy that he's gone in this direction because of the ridiculousness of it is so funny. So the whole thing with Queen accidentally shooting himself, and all the nonsense, and we have a whole bunch of nonsense with King coming up too. It's so fun to read. It reminds me not to take everything too seriously, which is hard for me. I'm very much the type of reader that like I hyper analyze everything, and if things don't add up, then I'm bothered. And stuff like this just reminds me, you're reading One Piece. Just chill out. It's all gonna be fine. I really loved the fight between Killer and Hawkins, and I didn't know how Killer was going to work his way around the situation with Hawkins having Kid's soul in him. And after this all resolved and after we finished the fight, my patrons did tell me that like everybody called this. Everyone remembered that Kid has no, which arm was it? Left arm. Kid has no left arm, so he's gonna cut off that and he's gonna end it, and it like everybody understood the situation but me. I did not know how he was gonna resolve it. I didn't call a thing. I just now realized something that apparently I need to talk about in a little bit as I'm looking back at these images. Ha! A new theory has been born in my mind. But I'll save that until we get to that part of the review. Ha! Anyway, this was an excellent fight. I had a great time. The fight, that one panel of Killer when he does his spin Sonic and he's like doing the backflip. Oh, it was great. I guess a lot of people called it. I didn't call it. I thought it was awesome. Foxfire is still alive. I know you're surprised. I know you didn't see it coming. No one would have called this, right? Nobody dies in One Piece. I mean, everybody dies in One Piece. It does have a reason behind it, though, with, you know, the whole, everything that happened with Law, and Sanji was the one that put Foxfire back together. One of my patrons reminded me of that. So it's not like Law, you know, it's not like he failed to put Foxfire back together or anything. It's just like, it was a makeshift, okay, here, your body's back together now. So I guess, okay, sure, that means that he's a new Buggy. He can just be chopped up and everything's fine. Why not? Honestly, sure. Okay, Kiku's alive, everybody's fine. His line, it's hard to believe I'm still alive with my torso severed. I'm just like, no, it's not. Also, Kanjuro is alive. Now, here's the thing with this one. I'm fine with Kanjuro still being alive. We've already had, like, you know, we keep trying to take him down. He keeps popping back up. He's a villain. He's a bad guy, whatever. And I also don't feel like Oda tried to get some emotions out of me. He didn't try to make it a big, dramatic death that would make me cry. And then he takes it back a couple chapters later. With Kanjuro, it was like, you know, it wasn't that way, and so I'm less offended by this. And also, I think probably part of what makes me less bothered by this is the fact that he created this monster still being manipulated even as he's dying to draw this, depict the burning hatred of the Kurozumi clan. And the way he depicts it is in this fire beast. That's really powerful, actually. And the way Orochi, the way he, again, gaslights, the way he manipulates him in how he is using stage language, and he's not saying, serve me minion, he's making it seem like an honorable thing. Let me mute that. He's making it seem like an honorable thing to keep fighting and to go out with a bang. And he's pitching it as if, you know, listen to the audience. Can you hear them? He's depicting this death and this last sacrifice as this big, honorable stage performance. And he's like, Orochi doesn't care. He doesn't care in the slightest about Kanjuro or about his ambitions or about his desire to die on the stage or his desire. He doesn't care about any of this, but he uses all that language to manipulate him into creating this beast to fit his agenda. And I just hate him so much. Honestly, Oda writes the best villains, because he could have easily just made Kanjuro a loyal servant to Orochi. Like, he could have just said, you're my family, let me manipulate. No, the fact that Orochi is using the language as if he understands his ambitions, but he doesn't. He's just manipulating him. It's so good. Anyway, his final act is awesome, and it is devastating and deadly and only makes everything worse for everybody. So, you know, good job. It was still a really good scene. I'm really not too bothered by this one. But anyway, here we are with Law's awakening. They're fighting off against Big Mom, and I do love seeing Law and Kid, these two people who, I believe they were both after the One Piece at one point. They both wanted to become Pirate King. At least Law did at one point. And now, instead of bickering and fighting and trying to come out the top, now they're still bickering and fighting, but they're bickering and fighting for Luffy. And I really, really appreciate, I don't know, I think that just shows that much more how much Luffy has that draw of people just falling under him. Both Law and Kid had their awakening, and Law's is so cool how he is able to transform his sword, make his sword so that he can penetrate through the person and then like damage them from the inside. I love this dynamic. I love that it didn't immediately take her down like Law was expecting, but it continued to damage her to the point that she was huffing after every line of dialogue, and she was so tired and so beat down, but still so cocky and sure she would win. And I really enjoyed watching Law and Kid team up against her. They still bicker the whole time, like this bit right here, when Law asks him how long does the power hold, and Kid says, "Why should I tell you all of my secrets?" Like they're still bickering the whole way through, but Kid's ability to be able to make anything magnetic, not just what he's manipulating, but that he was able to assign it to Big Mom, was amazing. I loved seeing Big Mom rise up and be the character that I love to see her as, seeing her so fierce and strong, sucking the souls out of everybody around her. We got some amazing dark, shadowy panels of her. The Big Mom that I loved in the beginning and then kind of fell out of love with when she got her Hunger Pangs rampage. And then here she is again, being this fierce, terrifying creature that's so strong and that is so... I mean, the fact that she can have a broken bone and then turn her bone into a homie and have that kind of mend itself, like that's so clever. It's like whenever Doflamingo knitted his body back together with his string powers. That's so clever. I love that Oda does this, that he takes these seemingly very basic abilities, but he makes the characters so creative in the way that they use these abilities so that they can become seemingly invincible because of the creativity they have. But also that scene when she was stealing the soul from everybody and she thought she was going to steal the soul from Law and Kid. Yeah. As well, but she didn't, and they both just weren't fazed at all. I love that so much because when she did it to Jinbei, who is forever amazing, he understood her abilities and it didn't work because he understood what was going on and he didn't fear her. But with them, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't understand her abilities. They don't realize that if they just don't fear her, then they can't have their lives taken. They don't know. They just don't fear her. They just legitimately are not afraid of this woman. And that's incredible. They're facing off against an Emperor of the Sea. An Emperor of the Sea. And they genuinely are not afraid. That's really friggin' cool. All right, let's spend some time talking about Sanji now because I love what we've been getting from Sanji in these chapters. It has been so hard to watch him genuinely, like, run away. He ran away from the fight and had fear in his eyes, afraid that he was being turned into a monster. And, you know, we got that scene of him supposedly beating up the girl, which I totally never believed. I don't know. It seems one step too far for Oda. I just don't think that he would do that with Sanji to actually make him a monster. Making him having to wrestle with being a monster, sure, but actually causing him to beat a woman down, I don't think it's, I just never did I consider it as a possibility. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what the solution was, but I didn't believe it for a second. And I loved this conflict of Sanji genuinely believing that the augmentation was just asleep or, you know, whatever the wording is, that it actually did work. It just wasn't actively working in him. But him using the suit caused that to awaken, that he was now losing control of himself and actually turning into a monster, that he was losing his ability to choose his own future and choose his own destiny and choose who he wanted to be, his own values and beliefs, that against his will, he was going completely against those things. Someone who's always been a protector is now causing physical harm to people. And seeing him have that conflict was really, really powerful, especially coming off of the Whole Cake Island arc, seeing what he fought against, seeing what he ran from, seeing what he was actively trying to go against, and then, you know, not believing himself to be able to escape his family, and then relying on his crew to escape them. And now he asks this question of himself, how can I be more useful to Luffy? As someone who gets trapped in the web, someone who has a massive weakness that he can easily get trapped in the web of women, or someone who is a monster, but who's stronger, who doesn't have that gaping weakness, who is capable of beating a woman that's trying to, you know, capture him and you know, Black Maria. And asking that question of, you know, how do I better serve Luffy? By being the monster that I'm terrified of, or by having this massive weakness? And then him asking that question and then destroying the suit and choosing, I would rather have this weakness than to lose who I am. I was so proud of him to make that choice. It really, to me, it's so impressive because Sanji's gag isn't funny to me. You know, I do think that Oda has amazing humor in this series, but a lot of times with Sanji, his humor just isn't good to me. I just don't like it. A lot of times with Sanji, the humor is a big swing and a miss. But I love that this gag of Sanji's that I don't care for has actually become deeper than just getting Sanji in sticky situations or getting him out of the way when, you know, he would easily be able to win a fight, or just using it for the laughs. It's become so much deeper than that, where it's actually recognized as, this is a flaw for me. This is a way in which I weaken my crew. But then him choosing to accept that flaw about himself, not necessarily accept that it's good that he wants to peep on women, but accepting that, like, I have this flaw and I'm not going to get rid of it for the sake of compromising who I am as a person. In one fell swoop, Oda took what has up to this point been used as a gag and actually added a lot of depth to it, and it made it into a huge character moment that Sanji is willing to accept this flaw in him over becoming the monster that he's fought against his entire life. That's an incredible moment for him. And two, also, I think that it's also really, really interesting that it adds a lot of layers to his mom's sacrifice, because of everything that she went through in order to protect Sanji from this augmentation and in order to give him this free will. It complicates that a little bit, right? Because now he is being influenced and he is losing a piece of himself. At least at this point, he really super thinks he is. But I don't personally think that it's really taken anything away from her sacrifice. It just adds a little bit of complication to it, because without her sacrifice, he never would have been able to abandon his family. He never would have been able to seek out his own freedom. He never would have been able to find his own dream and his own life and follow his own path. He never would have been able to find a different mentor and develop his own belief system and his own standards and morals and core values. He wouldn't have had the opportunity to do any of that stuff were it not for his mom's sacrifice. So the fact that he's now battling with this augmentation and that he's being influenced by what his dad tried to do to him, to me, doesn't necessarily take away from her sacrifice, but it does complicate it. And it also, in my eyes, almost amplifies how much he's been given by her that he has to fight for it all over again. Anyway, following that up with him calling Zoro, oh my goodness. I think it's so cool that when Sanji was charged with taking care of Zoro, and he whined and he complained, but he did it, and he wrapped him up and he carried him around and he used him to fight with, and that gag was amazing. In that time frame, at some point, he stuck a transponder snail in Zoro's belt so that if he ever did lose track of Zoro in the fight, in the kerfuffles and in the craziness, that he could go find him. And I love these two so much. I love these two so much because I think I said this in the last review, they're brothers. They're like brothers. They make each other mad and they irritate each other faster than anyone else can. They're constantly getting on each other's nerves. They're constantly bickering and fighting. But at the end of the day, they would do anything for each other. And that is so exemplified in this scene to me, that Sanji, when Zoro was in his charge, that he snuck a transponder snail in his belt so that if in this war they're fighting, if he lost track of him, he could go find him and make sure that he could start taking care of him again, make sure that he continued to protect him. And then when Sanji was at his weakest, when he was questioning himself more than he ever has, when he truly believed that he was starting to become a monster, he called Zoro. He knew that of everybody in the crew, Zoro would be the one that would understand losing yourself, would understand the threat that he could be to the crew, and that would be the one to kill him if he had to. In his weakest moment, in his weakest state, he called his brother. He had just been protecting and taking care of his brother when he was down, and now when he was at his weakest, he called Zoro and asked him to take care of him if it came to that point. And of course, it's awesome seeing Zoro having this whole conversation while he's fighting, and while he's got a sword in his mouth, he's having this conversation with Sanji. But anyway, let's keep talking about Sanji. There's more to talk about. I won't spend all day here. Actually, no, one more thing. I do find it really cool, really interesting that Sanji has the ability, well, that he's essentially become hurt-proof. He's bulletproof. Giant swords will break when you try to use them to cut him. I do find it really interesting that the level ups that these characters got are the antithesis of one another. Sanji says, hey, kill me if it turns out I'm a monster, knowing that it would actually just break Zoro's sword, so maybe this is all just a big prank. And then Zoro having the flame swords, it's just interesting. It's interesting that their level ups are associated with each other. At least they are in my mind. Anyway, the music guy and Drake, they team up. I don't have a lot to say about those two, honestly. There's a lot going on that I'd rather talk about, so they team up. I acknowledge that. Now for King and Zoro's fight, since we're talking about these two so much, let's just move on to King and Zoro's fight. I have so many feelings. Okay, so more amazing dinosaur knowledge on Oda's part. He really did his research when he wrote this. We have King pulling his face back in dino form to make the goofiest face in the world so that he can then slingshot himself to hit Zoro. Once again, Zoro gets so many cool fight panels. The way he looks when he's fighting, he's just always, I wish I could show you these panels, but I can't. He's always, when he makes a move and then he lands and Oda gives him so many cool fight panels. So many cool fight panels. But anyway, also Emna is acting up. Cut back to Sanji. Queen, it turns out the reason he has been goating? The reason he's been egging Sanji on to get in his suit is because Queen knew the whole time all about the Germa suit, all about all the things, and in fact, he is more advanced than anyone in all of these scientific matters. Obviously, look at his dino contraption. And he can contain all of Germa abilities. Which, as soon as he did that, as soon as he said that and he started displaying that he has all their abilities, obviously, we're all going to come to the same conclusion. He's the one that went invisible and hurt the girl, because he sucks. Once again, Queen, terrible, terrible person. Just flip-flops back and forth in my mind between someone I love and someone I despise and want to be destroyed. So all this time that Sanji is having this internal conflict, this idea of, oh no, I'm losing who I am. My core values, the very core of who I am, is being overrun, and I am being the type of person that I despise the most. All this time that he thinks that he's turning into a monster and he's having this terrible complex. It turns out that it was Queen the whole time, and it wasn't Sanji, and he didn't have to go through all this, though I'm super glad that he did, because oh my goodness, what amazing moments we got with him. But then, as soon as Sanji realizes that he can turn invisible and that he was the one that did it, the fact that Sanji didn't have a bunch of turmoil, he just realizes it, and then from there realizing that this man put him through all this, but even worse, that he hurt a woman, that Sanji then lands his most powerful kick, and in that he was able to take down the person that put him through all this, but also he was able to once again defend the innocent. That was such a satisfying scene. Oh yeah, and then the panel after he takes down Queen, where he's just standing there in the middle of the floor and it's all white around him. It's so powerful. And then the mouse comes in. I mean, the mouse came in before. That's how we realized that she was beat up by Queen. But I'm so glad that Oda added the panel of his flashback of him taking care of the mouse, because as soon as I saw that mouse, that's exactly what I thought of. And oh my goodness, the scene lands. It hits so hard. And then Sanji asking her if she's okay as he's passing out. I gotta tell you guys, I really have not been digging Sanji for a long time. I mean, I have, Whole Cake Island helped. My point is, post time skip, I've not been having a good time with his character at all. And I'm already pretty up and down with him, but post time skip, it's like, man, Oda doesn't want me to like him anymore. Whole Cake Island helped a lot. It put so much more characterization in him. It gave him so many amazing moments. It was what I needed for his character. Wano is topping that. Wano is topping that. So anyway, let's cut back to Zoro and Queen. Nope, King. What are they up to? King's a heartthrob. King takes off his mask and he is a fella that all of my patrons lost their minds over. And we get such a short yet questions, so many questions invoking flashback where King was captured and Kaido goes up to him and says, I'm breaking out of this place and starting a new pirate crew. What do you say? So I wonder, why was Kaido there? But anyway, he asks, can you change the world we live in? And Kaido says, I'm the only one who can change it. And then we have these panels of him taking King under his wing and being kind to him and caring for him, which we've already seen that humanity in Kaido before, him not wanting the people that he cares about, his crew, to be harmed. We see him laughing, like full face, genuine laughing, and genuinely wanting to protect his people and to change the world. And I gotta tell you, this has been spinning in my mind, because what happened to Kaido? You know, it reminds me a lot of Moria, how he wanted to be the Pirate King and he was so similar, but then he became this washed up guy who had given up. And now I look at Kaido, this man who used to be so full of life and so full of joy and had all this great ambition, and now he's satisfied to just control and harm a country and just be a drunkard and depressed, and we never see emotion on Kaido's face. He always has this very stoic mentality. We were introduced to him, not mentality, disposition. We're introduced to him when he's trying to kill himself. He's constantly wanting to remain drunk. He's so depressed now. And seeing this flashback of him so full of life and hope, and I just want to know what happened to get us here. What happened to get us here? We also got in the flashback King having the same loyalty to his captain that Zoro has to his, and wanting to do everything in his power to make his captain the Pirate King. It made this defeat of King so bittersweet for me, because we see that King is just another Zoro. King is just another second in command, second to his captain, doing everything in his ability, committing himself to making his captain the king of the pirates. He's just another Zoro. And so Zoro cutting him down and taking down another person's dreams, honestly, it was bittersweet. Like, I want our crew to win, but it still kind of hurt to see. But then also kind of worried me a little bit, because seeing us be introduced to King being Zoro and then watching Zoro cut him down. And at the same time, we're getting these parallels of when Zoro proclaimed that Luffy was going to be the Pirate King, and he'd do everything in his power to make him that king as he's cutting down someone else's dreams that are exactly the same for someone else. It almost looks like foreshadowing that this is going to happen to Zoro as well. And I just don't really want to reckon with that. The move where King creates that dragon thing and Zoro cuts through it, Zoro then taking on and saying, okay, well then I'll just be the king of hell. So similar to Robin saying, I'll be the demon then for my crew, for my pirate king, and then Zoro doing that, and it seems like he's now embracing the will of Emna and like proving that he's strong enough, that he's deserving of wielding her. I don't know. I'm just saying it was a really good scene. I also really like the scene with Usopp, where he says, when both Foxfire and Kiku are saying, just leave me behind, and Usopp's like, then why did I even show up? What is with you, samurai, and your death wishes? What is it with your pride? I'm not a fan of this culture of yours. I cling to life with snot running from my nose if I have to. I don't care if it looks pathetic. I survive. It's what I do, and it's the entire reason I'm standing here today. Why are you idiots so satisfied with just pulling off your raid? I really like this because I think that this is something that Oda does a lot, where he presents two different yet equal perspectives. Like, for instance, Fishman Island is the first thing that comes to my mind because I love that arc, but he didn't just explore racism by exploring one person and the way it affects them, but he explored so many different facets and the way it affects people in so many different ways. I'm trying to think of some more examples. A great example, I think, is in Whole Cake Island, when it talked about when Sanji didn't want to just leave his family to die despite all that they've done for him. He didn't want to leave them to die that way, and he ended up going back and saving them. But at the same time, you had Lola's twin sister who abandoned her family so that she could protect her husband and her child, because that was who mattered to her. And you had these two people whose families were abusive and terrible and awful, and they both needed to get away from their families in order to live a happy life. And Sanji saying, I won't abandon my family to this late fate, and her saying, I absolutely will abandon my family so that I can protect my own. And these two different people experiencing very similar situations but responding in different ways, and neither one was moralized. They were just, this is what they had to do. And I think Oda does this all throughout his series. He's constantly doing stuff like this, where he presents two completely different reactions to things, but he's not necessarily saying, and here's the correct one. He's just showing that life is layered. And I think this is one of those situations where you have the samurais who, you know, believe in honor and who they're willing to die in battle, and they consider dying in battle honorable, and they're just all about fulfilling the ideals and the will of Odin and honoring his name to the end. And that is, I mean, everything about what they've done up to this point, I have admired and loved, and I think that they've proven themselves to be such honorable characters. But then you have Usopp, who's saying, you know, this isn't the end-all be-all, and actually living for your dreams and being satisfied with just pulling off the raid, but not actually clinging to life. You know, he's challenging that mentality with something that is also completely admirable. But it's also interesting that it's Usopp that's challenging this, because Usopp, while it's true he does cling to life with snot running down his nose, he also has more than once opposed this very view and risked everything for people. Like, he also had the same moment that Nami had, where he risked his life to declare Luffy as the Pirate King, and he had that back in Dressrosa when Nami was in danger. No, was it Nami? Was it Robin? Was it the little elven people, dwarf people? I remember nothing, my memory is terrible, but when he was about to abandon them and they were calling for his help, and then he turned around and he sacrificed everything to help them, and he risked his life to help them. There have been multiple instances where he doesn't actually live by this moral compass, but nothing's being moralized here because it's all a good point. And I think, I love that Oda does this all throughout his series, where he doesn't just say like, here's correct, but he shows multiple corrects, and then he also shows how layered and complicated it really all is. And I just really like that he does this. And I also think that we're not done with this moment with Usopp. I think that we're gonna circle back around to this and do more with this. This fight between Kaido and Luffy is really interesting to me, because after seeing his flashback where he was so happy, and full of life. And then now we know him as this stoic, hardened man who's so depressed, and now he's drinking while he fights, and he's laughing with Luffy because he respects him and he sees someone who might actually be able to defeat him, and that makes him happy. But then seeing him go through this massive range of emotions while they're fighting, him crying and laughing, and seeing so much emotion on his face for the first time is so fascinating to me. And the fact that Luffy was laughing along with him, he wasn't in his serious Luffy mode where he's trying to take down the bad guy, but that they were laughing together. I don't actually know how to analyze this. I'm looking forward to getting more information, but it's all really interesting to me the way Oda is characterizing Kaido. And obviously Luffy understands a lot of it too, the fact that he's laughing with him as he's fighting him. Anyway, we get this massive bomb dropped on us that there's a fruit that the government has been hiding to the point that they thought that it wouldn't, that it didn't exist anymore. They forgot about it, but it's been awakened. It has not been awakened for centuries upon centuries. Then why would the world government bother to give that specific devil fruit another name? So they've been calling that fruit by a different name in order to erase it. So obviously, I don't think it's Luffy, because they've known about Luffy forever and they're acting as if there's some new information. So anybody that the world government has known about up to this point, all the Straw Hats are out. Anybody that the world government has known about up to this point is out. Obviously, my fastest conclusion, my quickest jump to conclusion is that it must be the elephant. I need to look up what's elephant's name. While I'm waiting on them to respond to me, I'll just keep talking. So my obvious, because Oda does this all the time, where he delivers some information. Oh wow, they're so fast. Zunesha? He does this a lot where he'll present some information, and then in the next panel, the one before it, earlier in the chapter, he'll have introduced something. So this is a really obvious one though. This isn't even a sneaky one. It's like we're talking about this thing, and then there's Zunesha, right? So Zunisha. Thank you for the pronunciation. There's Zunisha. So the obvious guess should be that, but it's almost so obvious that I question it. And then I wonder, it could be the little girl, hey? You know, like if they're keeping a close eye on Wano, then it could be her and her face cheek powers, because it's certainly very powerful. I don't really know why the world government would care about covering that one up, and why would it have been kept a secret for centuries upon centuries, and they're only just realizing that it's awakened. I'm not really sure about her as much. I'm kind of leaning towards Zunisha because of the obvious. I mean, it would be the obvious choice. I don't know. I don't have any good theories, but I'm super excited that Zunisha is here, because that opens up so many doors. And I'm actually so mad that there's not more chapters to read yet. Also, another really big thing that happened is Death showed up to kill Zoro. So I'm eating my words just a tiny bit, because in the last video, I might have gotten a little bit feisty about this magical antidote that made Zoro all better. Now, granted, y'all pointed out to me that there were consequences. He's going to experience double the pain. But that feels inconsequential to me, because Zoro can sleep off nearly dying, you know? So, and he took on like all the pain of all the time, always, back in the nothing happened moment. So like that, I guess just, I read it and then it flew out of my mind, because it's like, yeah, sure, big words. We do that. Zoro takes on all the pain. He can handle it, right? And then Death shows up. And we're reminded that Zoro's supposed to take on double the pain. And then Death shows up to kill Zoro. And then Oda stops talking. Death shows up to kill Zoro, and then Oda stops talking. Excuse me, sir. I'm gonna need you to circle back around and resolve this one real quick. I definitely don't think Zoro's dying here. I think that has not been foreshadowed. That has not, I don't see that coming at all at this point. I I will tell you that before I sat down to film, I had no guesses because death just friggin' showed up. You know what I mean? Like, what am I supposed to guess here? Maybe Zoro's gonna fight death to win his life back. That would actually be really funny, and I would love that if Zoro was like, catch me if you can. And they start fighting, and Zoro beats Death, and Death is like, okay, I'll come back for you later then. That would be awesome. But as I was filming this review, when I was talking about Hawkins versus Killer, I noticed that Hawkins had a scythe. Now the scythe did get broken when Killer cut off, when Killer won the fight, the scythe did get broken, but I noticed that Hawkins had a scythe. So, here's a scythe. Now I'm wondering if this isn't actually death. I'm looking at this panel as I'm talking to you, and I see now, I wasn't really paying attention at the time because I was a little bit too caught up in the screaming, but now that I'm looking closely, I see that there is a skeleton under Death's cloak and scythe. The skeleton does look like Brook. And the scythe was in a fight not that long ago. It is possible that Brook picked up a scythe and this is him. I don't know why Brook would be doing this. I have no reason why Brook would be doing this right now. And I could be completely wrong. And this is, I mean, literally, I thought of this while I was filming because I saw the scythe while I was talking about that fight. But I'm just saying, it is possible that this isn't actually Death. I'm completely down for Zoro versus Death, for Zoro to fight for a few more years on his life. I'm completely down for that, but also this might be Brook, and he just picked up Hawkins' scythe. Anyway, I'm running out of time to film. I've been here for quite a while. But I do want to wrap up the fight with Law and Kid and Mom, which I basically already covered, but as I'm scrolling through those panels, as I'm talking to you, I just want to talk a little bit more about how great this fight was. I kind of covered all the details with Mom, you know, rejuvenating her arm and with them using their awakening powers and working together. And I guess I don't have that much more to say about it other than just I loved it. It was so intense. The entire time I was reading it, I was actually holding my breath. And I didn't notice until they finally took her down, and I sighed so big, and I was like, I was so into this. Them pushing themselves to their absolute limits, her continuing to bounce back and continuing to land hits and continuing to taunt them and believe you cannot take me down, even as she's huffing and losing so much stamina, and them working together to finally take her down. And I don't think she's done. Her whole speech as she was falling, when she's talking to Roger and saying, why did you do this to raise up these people that are so strong? Why do you have to go and say that? You got the whole world in on this great era of piracy. Easy for you. You're dying. But when those kids rise up all over the world, we'll be the ones who have to deal with them. Her recalling, I suppose she must have had this conversation with Roger at some point, because she's asking him, she's saying, just tell us about the One Piece before you die. So obviously this is a recollection of something that she once said to Roger. But her recalling that of like, why? Just don't make us deal with these kids that are gonna rise up. And here she is, having had to deal with them, and remembering that as she's falling and as she's failed and as she's lost. She does say, don't think that this will be the end of me, so I don't think that this is the end of her, but it was really satisfying. As someone who was pretty critical, pretty unconvinced about Big Mom joining this fight in general, making her way into Wano and the way it all played out. I mean, I didn't mind Mom joining up. I found the idea of us facing off against two emperors really exciting, but it was the way that it was done I wasn't thrilled with. But I gotta say, I'm really satisfied. My cat is very disoriented and upset with all the changes after the flooding. I am curious what we're gonna do with her crew at this point, because I don't know. It's just, I'm still very unsatisfied with her crew. They came with her to, excuse me, probably not all of them. I don't really know to what extent her crew came, but there was a good chunk of her crew that came with her to Wano to back her up, to fight alongside her, to pledge their loyalty to her, and all we saw was the stupid tongue guy. And it was really satisfying, and he played a great purpose, and I really, really enjoyed the role that he played while he was a big focus here on Wano. But what about everybody else? You know, there's more than just him. And I gotta say, I want a lot more. I want to see Katakuri again. I want to see Pudding again. I want to see actually, here's the thing. Actually, let me have a bit of a tangent here, if you don't mind. I am way more invested and attached to Mom's secondary crew members, her children, than I am in Kaido's crew members. Now, I love Ulti, I love Pepe and the dynamics between them. I think Black Maria is so interesting. I like that one guy just because he's a helicopter triceratops, but not because of anything about him. Obviously, I love Yamato, but for the Yamato isn't really pledged to Kaido, so I don't know if that counts. For the most part, I don't really care about Kaido's people at all. His crew don't really concern me, but with Big Mom, I feel like I really got to know a lot of her kids, even Branch. I'm like, what's going on with Branch? Can we get a check-in on her? Can we get a check-in on Branch and Katakuri specifically? I just need to know more about how they're doing and what their mentality is. I think that there was so much complexity to the levels of loyalty of Mom's children to her. How many of them are properly loyal to her and how many of them are just serving her because they feel like they have to, because they feel trapped under her servitude. I think that there were so many layers and there was so much depth to the dynamics between the crew of Big Mom versus the crew of Kaido. And there's definitely a lot of that going on with Kaido, with the smile fruit users and with how they receive their smile fruits and their wavering loyalty because of Tama. There's a lot of factors with Kaido too that definitely makes his situation interesting, but I'm just more invested in Mom's crew. I'm just more invested in Big Mom's crew. I like Kaido better as an antagonist than I do Big Mom, but I like Big Mom's secondaries more. So I would really like, just hang out with me. I would really like to check in with them. I'm genuinely very unsatisfied with us bringing Big Mom's crew to Wano and then not really acknowledging them at all except for the one. So, Oda, if you're listening, I would love to have Big Mom's crew still make it onto Wano and still cause some problems. I don't want them to bring Mom with them. Don't make them have caught her falling out of the sky or whatever. Don't do any of that. But just have them come. I'd really like some more of them. I just want to know what's going on with them. I also never even mentioned Rizzo in this and his extremely long face-off, Battle of the Wills, Battle of the Loyalty. I'm excited to see that resolve. Oh yeah, and then also Momo casually mentions that Zunisha was not only friends, but family with Joy Boy. I'm gonna need a lot more information there. He can't act on his own will. He's ordered to be here. So who ordered Zunisha to get here? And Zunisha, who can communicate with Momo directly, knew Joy Boy directly and very personally. So once again, when this whole battle thing is over, we've got a lot of questions that we need answered, and we have so many resources to get those answers. And we can also finally learn what Zunisha did to earn this punishment and who gave this punishment to him. And hopefully we can finally allow him to rest, because honestly, I hurt for that guy, for that elephant. Anyway, that's a lot. We covered a lot in this video, like we always do. But this is my last video where we'll be covering this much information. I am now officially caught up. I know what you know. Unless you read the spoilers, then you know more than I know. but soon I'll know that too. And if you missed my video where I talk about what I'm doing now that I'm caught up with One Piece, definitely go check that out. I'll have it linked in the description and maybe even in the cards if I remember. And basically, I'm gonna be making a review video every approximately 3 chapters. Every time Oda goes on break, I'll be doing reviews. So we're definitely going to be hanging out some more. We have a lot more to discuss, and I'll finally be able to discuss in a much more concentrated, focused way, not trying to cover so many events at once, which I'm a little bit nervous about because I like covering so many events at once, because that means that I'm getting a lot of information, since Oda likes to break things up. And like Robin wasn't even in this entire giant section that I just tried to cover. She wasn't even here. So covering huge sections is nice, because as I hyper-analyze things, I have a lot of information to analyze at once. I no longer will have that benefit, which means I just need to do a lot of rereading, and I'm so fine with that. I'm also going to be reviewing Hunter x Hunter. I actually just read the first chapter today, and it's delightful. It's adorable. And a whole bunch of other stuff. Go watch that video if you want to. I am happy. These chapters were excellent. I love One Piece. Nothing has changed. Chat with me more in the comments, correct the things that I messed up, add to the things that I skimmed over. I post videos every Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you again soon. Bye.